So, hello and welcome to the first episode of Corporate Charcha. Today, we are diving into the world of our college alumni success stories. On the other end of the line, we have got a fantastic guest who's not only an entrepreneur but also an amazing, self dependent woman. Please welcome to the founder of Let's Adopt India and the founding president of CDFS CPS, Ms. Ashwita Gosmore.
Hi, Yojit. Hi, Sim. Thank you so much for having me here.
So, hi Ashmita, how have you been?
I've been great.
So, yeah,
Hi.
so what we as members of CDF want to know is that how did you get the idea to start CDF in our college?
Okay, that's a nice question. So, for me, I had always been passionate about social entrepreneurship to begin with. But what really struck me about CDF was that I was inspired by the 3C model that they follow, that is, collect, create, change, right? And so, how it essentially works is it's quite different from a typical social entrepreneurship model wherein you first interact with communities. You learn their issues, you empathize with them, and once you start looking at problems in their shoes, then that is when I believe that we can create the sharpest impact. And once we do have essentially a problem statement with us, then we start looking at various alternatives to solve for it. We evaluate the different alternatives. We finally implement the solution and then try to make it sustainable. So that is one model that greatly inspired me. And given the exceptionally talented and passionate people that we have at CBS, I found this as a great opportunity to bring Connecting Dreams Foundation to the college and trying to make impact happen.
Yeah, so like you said, you have faced challenges before. Also, when we have become coordinator, we have seen that how the work goes at the back end. Like we have to make groups new, we have to start the new project, start new initiatives. So there's a lot of problems with us in the initial phase, but we are coping with it too. So, what are the initial challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them to establish CDF a prominent society?
Right. So, interestingly, when we were starting CDF, so I'm sure as you guys are trying to navigate some issues right now, we also face those issues. And given that we were at that time, we were in the pandemic, the college was essentially happening virtually. So we essentially spent like 4 to 5 months just ideating and putting all the pieces together. So we did brainstorm a lot of ideas. We had a lot of plans. So we did think of a few projects in the pipeline. We got in touch with a few NGOs, few communities, and try to understand their issues. Try also like ideated some projects with them. But as soon as everything started getting formalized and when CDF was launched as officially as a society, the COVID wave hit. The entire nation went into a lockdown, and that did put our plans to a halt. But again, that did present an interesting challenge, as well as it also presented a lot of opportunities, definitely for us to help and create impact, because the entire country was struggling with getting the basic resources for healthcare, be it face masks, be it oxygen cylinders, hospital beds, etc., etc. And we knew our first priority would be to help in the short run. So we did got volunteers apart from our initial founding team. We got volunteers. We partnered with NSS, and we started maintaining active repository of contacts of resources to source the basic essentials. We started validating the numbers to help and contribute uh, to whatever extent we could. And once this thing dialed down, we also thought of an amazing opportunity of so the first project that we had was Project Hunar, which was an upskilling project for underprivileged women. So we, like, as I mentioned, we were in talks with a lot of NGOs, and one NGO that we were in close touch with was the Naya Savera Foundation. We had visited them, and we got so essentially the foundation is in Old Faridabad, wherein they teach everything from school education to craftsmanship to basic stitching or makeup and beauty skills to a lot of women, underprivileged women over there. We interacted with them, and we found out, even though that the women there were extremely talented, extremely humble, extremely passionate, but they did lack the necessary exposure. uh, I mean, nothing against them, but they they simply did not have the exposure. They could not even think of having aspirations outside of, let's say, their home, or what minimal things they could do in their neighborhood locally. So we thought of this project wherein we launched cotton reusable face masks as well as scrunchies, the hair bands, which were
Yeah.
quite that is. So these products were quite similar to quite simple to make, required basic raw material, and the skills actually were there. The women were quite skilled, so we taught them how to everything from the basic stitching to personal accounting to marketing to vendor negotiations. All of these terms do sound quite fancy and all these corporate buzzwords, but uh, essentially it's quite simple when you do business at a very basic level, and to instill the spirit of entrepreneurship. So apart from imparting the technical skills of how to make these products, the end goal essentially was to make the project self sustainable, and even after we hand it over to the women, they can actually have a source of income for themselves, and scale it as per them. So that so the what was essential there was to impart them with the softer skills, so that stay with them. So that is what we focused on. And after initial few rounds of procuring the raw material, doing the marketing and selling activities for them, we started um, onboarding them uh, in these processes, and we gradually handed it over to them. And that is one project that we are extremely proud of as the founding team of CBS.
Yeah. So as you said, like you use fancy words like vendor negotiation and all. So they are the ones who negotiate with the vendor, or you are just an intermediator for the whole project?
Right. So, as I mentioned, initially we took over all these things when we had an established ground, because it was a first project for us as well. So, we had to do the initial setting up the network, setting up the value chain. But these women were extremely quick to pick it up. And the entire art, as I mentioned, it goes back to going to the community, engaging with them, understanding their strengths, their areas of improvement, their lifestyle, their culture, and then creating curated solutions or curated skill development modules for them, so that they can take this up on their own as per them. Because how they would work is extremely different than, let's say, what a large corporation, how large corporation would function. So that is where the sense lies.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, so like you got many soft skills and managing how to manage a whole team or group of people. So yeah, we did a LinkedIn search, background research. So we found like you have a diverse experience at KPMG, BCG. So like, can you share how these skills helped you work there and what were the learnings you got there?
Okay, that's great. So I worked in KPMG right out of college. That was my first work experience as a fresher. And KPMG being a large organization, it's a huge corporate with
Yeah,
tens of thousands of employees in India alone. So it was a very distinct kind of work environment than what I worked, how we operated in CDF, if you're asking about that. It was an interesting experience for me. So there was a lot of learning involved initially. Uh, the like if you work at a corporate, there's a lot of levels of hierarchy involved. There's a lot of procedures and systems in place. Everything is quite predefined and process oriented. So that was also a challenge, but also a great learning opportunity for me. uh, I was fortunate enough to have a great team to work with. In terms of the work that I did, I got to learn a lot. I was personally inclined towards finance and consulting, and I was kind of on the crossroads which path to take. So this it gave me a good exposure to both the domains. And yeah, what was you asked about BCG as well, right?
yeah,
So at BCG, I was a summer intern here at IMA, and in BCG, I was purely on a strategy consulting piece. BCG again, although it's a large corporate, but again it's obviously in terms of the number of people, it's much smaller than a KPMG or any other big four. Also, if you work in strategy consulting, there tends to be some ambiguity if you contrast it to financial due diligence that I did at KPMG. So even in FDDs, the procedure is quite quite structured, and uh, essentially the module is very well defined. But working in consulting, there's a lot of ambiguity involved. There's a lot of learning that goes on, because having absolutely no idea about the industry, you have to understand all the nuances of the industry. You have to learn about the value chain, about the competitive dynamics, about the client, because essentially you are providing a solution, you're pitching a solution to the client, and the solution has to be customized enough for the client to implement. So that was an interesting work experience where I got to use a lot of more flexibility and a lot of more creativity in terms of my work. And in BCG as well, you are given the entire ownership of your module. So I got to drive my module however I wanted to, whichever piece I wanted to pick up, however I wanted to structure it. So that again was great learning for me. I essentially did make some mistakes along the way, but I had great mentors to guide me through. And yeah, both the work experiences did teach me vastly different skills, and I'm grateful for both.
so you had a diverse experience from both KPMG and BCG. Like there was a diverse role and experience from finance to consulting. So it leads to a tremendous growth while working with on projects individually. So like how did you manage? How were you able to manage these like demanding roles with your personal life?
Um, okay. Um, so again, start as I currently am still starting out in my career. I'm very early on in my career. So although like these both of these roles are quite demanding, working in finance, working in consulting, these are the two most hectic industries that you can work in. I will first talk about KPMG. So I worked in FDD, and which is typical for any due diligence project. The timelines are extremely tight. The working hours are extremely long, but um, again, the learning is extremely steep. And I would say, starting out in one's career, the focus should be on learning. Even if you have to put in the extra hours, even if you have to put in the extra work, the grind, the learning that you get out of it really helps you going forward. Because I even did at times I had to do a lot of menial, repetitive clerical tasks as well. But looking back, even those tasks help me understand the granularity or the base of how we do things at the higher level, and how all of these tiny things do make an impact at a higher level. So I believe even if you have to put in a few long hours, which might not be the ideal scenario, but it really pays off in the long run.
Yeah. Like you transition from CBS to IIM Ahmedabad, no? So like what
Yeah.
all advice would you give to the aspiring students? What all skills should they possess for this thing?
Okay. Um, so that's a great question. Actually, coming from CBS, we do feel like everyone has some sort of insecurity, or the thing that these IIMs are just big behemoths of things that needs to be cracked. But having interacted with students coming from a lot of undergraduate colleges across India, I would say CBS sites are extremely well positioned, because the environment we have here in CBS since day one is hyper competitive, and I'm saying that in a positive way, that drives you to do things that inspires you to push yourself to uh, explore the new experiences, be in terms of case competition or internships, or the different the the number of societies that we have at CBS. So I believe the exposure that we get is vast when you compare it to other students from other undergrad colleges. Um, in terms of the skills required, I believe there's no any particular skills required to crack any of the B school interviews. So one advantage, as I said, CBS sites have is that they're very well informed since day one, what is required in terms of what is required, what the process is, and they do know what like they do have an expectation of what they want from their career. So that in that sense, CBS sites do get a head start in terms of the skills required. I believe um I would just say, like, at B schools they just look at candidates who like who can be good alumni that they can be proud of. That is one basic, in the most simplistic manner that I would put it, what B schools expect out of candidates. So you just have to be, I would say, in terms of interview prep, be well informed, be very clear of what you want out of your MBA, not and like they definitely look beyond just the motivation being an MBA tag, but what essentially you want to gain out of your MBA. What is it? The exposure, it is the learnings. What so yeah, just focus on that.
So doesn't they include like any communication skill or interpersonal skills, like while recruiting you, like during the interviews? Like what all they look upon?
Okay, yeah, these hygiene factors are definitely there, like having fluent communication skills or interpersonal skills, as you mentioned. But again, these are not deal breakers, because people do at B schools come from diverse backgrounds. People do also come from tier 3 cities, small towns, and they do appreciate that. They do not want fluently speaking people, they just want people who are extremely sharp. We want people who are good, who have a good academic acumen, I would say. People who are like well informed. Be like, if you're asking in terms of how to prepare for a case interview, sorry, for a B school interview, I would say be very well informed, be generally aware of what is going on around the world, be very well informed about your hobbies. Let's say if your hobby is dancing, so about the different kinds of dance forms, the different career opportunities, the famous dancers, etc., etc. We just come across as a highly informed, a very sorted person, and yeah. So some basic hygiene checks they do is that you should have a good academic acumen, because the academic rigor, especially at IIMs, is extremely high. So that is one hygiene check they do. Second is, whatever you state that you like or whatever you state that you're good at, be sure that you're actually good at, because they would ask you counter questions to validate whatever you're saying. And yeah, just focus on general awareness a lot.
Like, would you like to share your experience by conducting the interview, or if I am the one?
Okay. So my experience was quite different. Like my IIM interview was quite atypical in the sense that about like I did prepare about all of the undergraduate subjects I had studied. I had prepared everything about my profile, like my work experience at KPMG. I had prepared about, because I worked in the private equity sector, so I researched about all of the private equity deals that had happened over the past 1 year, etc., etc. I had mentioned certain hobbies. I had mentioned about CDF, Let's Adopt India. So I had learned about all of this, my hobbies. I had prepared everything, and the questions that were asked me in the interview were quite philosophical. So like I'll take a moment to recall, but one of the question went like so obviously it's not reproduced verbatim, but the sense was that education acts as a deterrent to crime. What are your views on it? So it can be as ambiguous as this. Or one question that I was asked, if there's one issue, any one social cause that that you feel so strongly about that will make you take to the streets to protest, what would it be and why? And so like nothing about the world or anything, and a lot of philosophical questions, and I'm not able to recall. Yeah, one question was that Brazil's ex-president Da Silva was in prison, and I did not know why he was in prison. So they asked me, why do you think he could be in prison? So there can be multiple reasons. It could be political opponents, uh, vendetta, or it could be that he was on corruption charges, or etc., etc., etc. So you don't know what they're trying to judge. You don't know what kind of questions that you'll be asked, and like it was a lot of philosophical questions that I'm not able to recall. But yeah, it was an atypical interview, but it was an interesting. It was very conversational. So so I had listed Formula One as one of my hobbies, and yeah, so they asked me about. So they went like a woman watching Formula One. Isn't that strange? And they just wanted to see my reaction on it and my views on it. And then they asked, "Do you have other female friends who are into this? Because it's a male-dominated sport, etc., etc." So like I had mentioned so many things, and I had so many hooks in my introduction. So as the initial question is to introduce yourself, and that gives you sort of a way to drive the interview wherever you want. So a good practice is to have certain hooks in your introduction. Keep the introduction very short, to like 30 to 40 seconds, and briefly mention certain things that you want the professor to be intrigued about, and you want the professor to further inquire you on. So I had a lot of hooks. But one thing that, and just hobbies, mentioning hobbies towards the end is a basic hygiene check that I had in my introduction. And so in that hygiene check, I did also mention watching Formula One as a hobby. And I would say 90% of the interviews, that particular point was picked up and it was inquired about. I did not even prepare on it. I had, that's the least expected thing that you would expect professors to pick up. But yeah, I would say the interviews are not at all structured. I have interviewed with almost all B schools um, in India, and like no two interviews were alike, definitely. And just keep an open mind. The interview can be driven in any direction. Just stay calm, stay composed, and keep an open mind.
Do you still watch Formula One?
Actually, yeah, I believe the qualifying just ended for the British GP.
Yeah, like I had no idea about it. Yeah.
So like there was a lot to prepare, from general knowledge to past experiences, work experience. academics and all. So like, can you recommend some books or like resources that you particularly used in your preparation?
Okay. So for me, I personally am not very fond of reading. I don't read a lot of books,
Same.
but but one thing that helped me prepare is I had subscribed to a lot of YouTube channels that bring a lot of business news, economic news, world affairs, and they present all of the facts in very simple, engaging, palatable manner. So I used to watch a lot of these videos. I used to keep them running in the background so that I, at least during the time of my interviews, I had done, like, I even usually I do this typically because I'm fond of this, but during the type of interviews, I did it profusely. And a few of the channels, if someone is like me, I I would recommend this Think School on YouTube. There's World Affairs. There's also Study IQ, although that would be a lower priority. But there are some great YouTube channels that do bring you all of the world news along with facts that help you form your own opinions, and I think that really helped me. Those definitely did help me.
Like in these channels, there's also some problems of like some channels are actually some bias towards a political party or social issue. So like, how do you like combat that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, study IQ, I would say would be a lower priority because over the years I have seen it leaning towards a particular direction. But yeah, as you keep on watching, you can try to differentiate between the channels that focus on pushing their opinions versus the channels that do present you factual information. So just focus on the facts, don't focus on the opinions, or don't focus on the narrative, and try to form your original opinions out of it. And anyway, this is just the way I worked, but there's so many newspapers. You can read articles. There's the Ken, there's the Hindu, and there's all these newspapers. There's Economic Times, Financial Times that one can read. I also used to read articles frequently. So yeah, one has to take all of these things with a pinch of salt and try to read between the lines. But these act as good source of information.
Yeah, so like when the student is in his third year, like he or she have two options, like to go for a placement or for IIM, like any other field. So like if someone goes for the like post graduation program, so like is there any disadvantage like directly starting for the PG from the UG?
Um, I would not position it as a disadvantage. There's definitely certain advantages, or I would not want to use the word advantage, but there's definitely some experience that comes along with a work experience. Because like, although my work experience was quite brief, it was just a year, but I did actually get to learn how a corporate actually functions. I was involved in projects end to end, how clients are managed, how to read financial statements beyond the basic ratios and in between the lines, and like how is for a professional services firm, because that is where I worked. How do you get clients, how do you get projects, how is the team structured, how to work in teams, and these are some of the skills that I learned. And when you do your MBA, speaking specifically from the perspective of an MBA, the class teachings are through cases, through case studies. We do not have books. I mean, we do get certain books, but those are for your personal reference. You're never taught from books in class. You are taught only via cases. You have active discussion on cases. How would this person have worked? How should this person have responded? Why did this happen? So the focus across subjects is on understanding people, because essentially everywhere anywhere you go in your life, you have to work with people, and that is something that I was able to relate to because of my work experience. But again, I would again not say a fresher who comes for their MBAs at any disadvantage, because they again are fresh out of college. They are more in touch with the cats. Like I had a whole 1 year gap. People have longer gaps. People come with 5 to 6 year work experience who have completely lost their touch. But in that sense, freshers do have an advantage. They are more in touch. They have fresh ideas, and like even if you're working in corporate, if you're working in a particular environment, your mind gets skewed in a particular direction. But freshers do bring their nuanced experiences, uh, their thinking. So I believe there's no one right answer. For me personally, wanted to gain some experience before heading for my MBA, but uh, I think it is a personal choice at the end of the day.
No issues. Uh, yeah, so Let's Adopt India. So yeah, Let's Adopt India is a noble initiative. Yes, we all know. So like, could you tell about the operational aspects of running the organization?
Okay. So I started Let's Adopt India based on a very personal experience, as well as similar experiences of people around me who face challenges when they wanted to adopt an animal. There were a lot of challenges that there are a lot of operational challenges that the shelter homes or animal NGOs or animal adoption centers do face, due to which it also becomes a cumbersome process for the adopter. So when I researched more about it, I talked to some shelter homes, I talked to a few NGOs. I knew a couple of people in my network who were involved in animal welfare. And being on the other side, being on the adoption side, I did face there was a lot. I did discover there was a gap in information, a gap in knowledge, and also a large dearth of resources to make the process smooth. So that is how I was inspired to start Let's Adopt India, to act essentially as an aggregator between the agencies or shelter homes or organizations who have animals up for adoption, as well as people who are looking to adopt. Um but again, there were some inherent risks or challenges involved with this model. One key challenge that I used to face, or one key dilemma that I used to face with every adoption, was that I am I am sitting at my home remotely trying to facilitate an adoption. Let's say from an adopter sitting in Pune trying to adopt from a shelter home in Mumbai. I do not know anything about that adopter, whether that animal is right to stay at that particular owner's home, or that particular person is well equipped to have take the responsibility of that dog or cat. So there was this one dilemma that was involved. So for this, we did essentially try to input some safeguard measures. We used to have background checks, remote background checks. We used to have very specific interviews uh, with the people looking to adopt before onboarding them on our platform. And again, we used to flag this information to the shelter as well. We used to advise them to run their own background checks, run their own due diligences before doing that, because essentially adopting an animal, that too if an animal is a little older, let's say 2 to 3 years older or even bigger than that, it's they have a particular behavior. They have which is very difficult to mold, and if they are the right fit for that home. Also, there was some lack of information, which we did not face in a lot of in the more structured shelters or NGOs, but there was also some lack of information for people who were giving up their animals to adoption, in terms of their vaccination history or some basic details as basic as their age, which was not possible to validate. So there was some operational challenges like this as these that we faced. But again, I am extremely proud of the work that we have accomplished. We have had over 50 successful adoptions. We have raised funds and mobilized funds in the neighborhood of 500K till date. And yeah, and once they're adopted, we can do some random visits after a month or a couple of months to see if that animal is adjusting well and if any intervention is required. So we used to work with the respective shelters to ensure that that happens. So these were some of the operational issues that we did face, but um, yeah, that is how we operated.
That's great to hear. You help 50 pets. Like as you said, it's a nationwide operation. You have to manage and coordinate with the people all over the India. So like how do you manage the fundraising, then volunteer coordination, then you have to outreach also to reach out to people to onboard them on a platform. So how do you manage all that?
Okay, so the way currently this is structured is it, the animal shelters or the people working in animal welfare are are highly fragmented all across the country. There are many people, there are many local communities that are doing exceptionally well for the animals in their area, and the only thing is that there's a lack of coordination and the entire structure is extremely fragmented, so the impact is limited to that particular area. So what we try to do at Let's Adopt is that we were in touch with all these local communities. We um, tried to coordinate with them. That sort of amplified the impact. So let's say, for instance, there was an urgent requirement for raising funds, and there are donors sitting all across India. There are some communities all across India, and once you bring that. So as I was saying, the entire community if you aggregate the entire local communities, you are able to exponentially amplify the reach. And let's say for instance, I would give an example. There was one person who was requesting to adopt a kitten in Bihar, somewhere near Patna, but they did not have access to any local shelter homes over there. And there was a kitten who had come up for adoption in Ghaziabad. Those two people would not have any way to connect with them. And we also had a few donors in Hyderabad who used to raise funds to facilitate adoptions, to mobilize funds for the logistics aspect of it, and coordinating between the three stakeholders, we got this adoption possible. So uh, just just leveraging the community and amplifying the impact is how we operated, and that actually helped us uh, cater to a lot of issues.
Yeah, so like as we have seen, social entrepreneurship is like a boom nowadays. Like everyone is doing entrepreneurship like in any of the field, but social is like more indulgent people. So like yeah, how do you see the role of social entrepreneurship in today's business world?
Okay. um I believe, as you mentioned, social entrepreneurship is definitely on a boom, and I would say social entrepreneurship, as per me, has existed since communities have existed or since business has existed, because social entrepreneurship is not having a large scale not for profit organization, or launching, let's say, a unique or novel creation that solves problems for communities at large. Social entrepreneurship at its very essence uh, is essentially solving problems that have a social impact. And if you solve any problem, even if it is for profit and it has a social impact and it solves a crucial problem for people or it makes people's lives easier, it is social entrepreneurship. And if you talk about corporates, like I would look at it in terms of corporates and small scale organizations or independent uh, entrepreneurs. In terms of corporate, corporates as well. Now the narrative has been changing. Now the expectations for the large corporates have been changing, be it due to government mandates or be it due to social expectations of these organizations to work beyond profit and work beyond their bottom line to actually work in a sustainable fashion. And these firms have been fueling enormous sums of money in social causes. Like in India, we have corporate social responsibility initiatives. We have firms going beyond these initiatives. The motivation could be any. The motivation could be PR. The motivation could be legal mandates. But what, in a sense, it helps in is mobilizing a lot of funds, mobilizing the right talent, mobilizing the firm's reach and accessibility in creating change. So there's this one aspect that of corporates that have now ventured into these social impact areas. Then another aspect is what we have of small scale organizations, and social entrepreneurship can be some, like as I said, even it could be a for profit venture. For instance, a company working in creating solar panels or uh, in harnessing wind energy. It essentially is a for profit organization, but it does help in solving crucial problems for people in remote areas. Um, who are deprived of electricity otherwise, or it is a more sustainable or more cleaner way of generating energy. Or even if you look at FMCG firms who create products for the bottom of pyramid market, there are FMCG firms who solely operate, who sell all these products like ghee, oil, shampoos, detergents to the bottom of pyramid markets, to the villages, extremely small towns, remote areas where other people would not venture. But that is how these people get access to these basic essentials. And if you ask me, I would say even that is social entrepreneurship. So the scope or the issue is with defining social entrepreneurship. It doesn't necessarily have to be foregoing profits or letting go of your returns. It is as basic as creating value for everyone, creating value for yourself, creating value for the investors, and creating value for the people.
So like entrepreneurship actually means making profit, but, but in social entrepreneurship you have to do well for the society as well. So like we have an incubation in our college as well, incubation center. So like we have seen many students actually, like they have their own ideas, they want to do something, build something. So do you have any advice for them how they can start? And like they face many challenges, like they are not able to like properly lay down a plan, like how they have to function. So if you could give some advice to them.
um so actually, even when I was in college, I was with my couple of friends. We had thought of this amazing startup idea, which had nothing to do with social entrepreneurship or anything, but we were very passionate about it. We spent like a good 6 to 7 months just researching about it, studying, doing market research, and having regular meetings and developing, laying down a plan, etc., etc., etc. But like down somewhere down the line it sort of fizzled out. We got busy in our internships and MBA prep and final placements, and then we never picked it up again. And I feel it like in majority of the great entrepreneurship ideas, this thing happens. Like initially you're extremely passionate about, I've thought of this great idea, um, and it has a huge potential, etc., etc. But once you start actually researching, once you start actually doing the groundwork, sustaining that, being motivated, staying motivated, especially in an environment that is highly skewed towards those conventional career paths of having a career in corporate or going for your MBA, because these are the two most treaded paths if you talk about CBS specifically. So staying motivated and staying determined is, I think, one one key challenge that one has to overcome. And if they're able to do that, I believe CBS offers a great platform in terms of the incubation center. The faculty advisors there are amazing to uh, to uh, to help with the initial guidance, to start with to provide seed funding. There's a lot of organizations beyond CBS who also are in incubating startups. But I believe one thing that entrepreneurs lack is that they do get married to their idea, they do get married to their product, and even even during the initial pilot testing or during the prototype, they do find some issues, or the viability of the product doesn't seem as promising as it did earlier. They still try to push for it, and then uh, then they face some issues. So I will my advice for people would be, and also it is coming partly from my personal experience and partly from experiences that I've seen from people around me, is it's good to be determined, it's good to be passionate about what you believe in, but also there's a fine line between getting married to that idea and not seeing the actual practicality or practical viability of it. And just keep an open mind, be prepared to pivot, be prepared to put in that effort, because it is I would say it is very easy to have a career in corporate, it is very easy to go for your MBA as well, but it is extremely difficult to build something from the ground up, scale it up and make it sustainable. So that does require a substantial amount of dedication, that requires a lot of effort, and that requires to keep one to keep cool mind and just work for it.
Yeah. So, lastly, looking back onto your journey so far, like you had many experiences. Would you like to share any proud or any regret moment in your journey?
um like any specific
Like not even
aspect
specific, but like you're very proud of it, or like you regret till now of that moment.
Or maybe an advice you would like to give to your younger self, like what you should have done in your
Exactly,
past,
exactly.
like you would like to correct a mistake or maybe something like that.
um okay, so yeah, I would want to answer both the questions. Firstly, starting with something that I'm proud of, is I still remember the moment, the day when I had my first successful adoption through Let's Adopt India. And like it had been over a couple of months since I had started. I was gaining great traction. I got connected to a lot of people, a lot of organizations doing great work. But as I mentioned, there were a lot of operational challenges that were faced, and matching the right people with the right requirement and vice versa was going to be tough. And although it was very initial, I had begun to question the viability of everything. But the day that I had my first successful adoption, and the when the dog got a loving home, the dog was not in a very ideal environment at the moment. So that moment, I believe I'm very proud of. It is very close to my heart, and I still do cherish it a lot, because I knew that I did something, and like whatever efforts that I had been putting till then actually proved to be fruitful. So that is one thing that I do hold close to my heart. Second question was about any advice to my younger self.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I like start like being in CBS in my first year, my second year. Although like as you guys would also have experienced, there's this hyper competitive environment.
yeah,
You are you are with you're surrounded by overachievers, winning all these awards, accolades, doing all these great things. And although it is a good thing to be a part of that community, and uh, get knowing those people, getting the same exposure, getting the same platform, same opportunities as them. But sometimes it does take a toll on oneself. It does make you question your abilities, comparing yourself to others. And there was a phase when I used to do that a lot. I went like I used to doubt everything about myself. I was extremely discouraged, but look, then a lot of self motivation and a lot of lot of mentorship that helped me along the way was that I had to, like, I did completely change my perspective, and instead of getting discouraged or demotivated by what others are doing or what of how the competition is, I actually started regarding it as a healthy competition or in a positive way, and that really did help me change my outlook. I like I started getting inspired by people rather than getting envious, essentially, and that did motivated me to do a lot of things and to push myself. And later, like, I also founded the Connecting Dreams Foundation after that, and that is one thing, as I mentioned, was quite close to my heart. I channeled a lot of my efforts, my energy into it, and I'm glad to see the organization still up and running, people like you continuing the legacy.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, that's a such an inspiring and quite interesting conversation with you. Yeah, so when we will upload it anywhere, like on YouTube or Spotify, like we have decided, so they must feel motivated and excited about the social entrepreneurship, life at IIM, and the CDF, like how we are doing and all, like from where it got up and how it's doing till now. So yeah, fantastic, and thanks again for joining us. Wish you all the best in your continued success. Yeah,
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Wish you guys all the best for this podcast series, and wishing all the best to Connecting Dreams Foundation.